The gun control types in Canada have a long and proven track record of being irrational, but do they take it far enough for it to be considered a mental illness? Let's have a look. Welcome back to the channel. So today I want to explore an idea which is sort of a continuation of my last few videos. In the last month alone, there has been no shortage of deception and ideology being pushed on the gun control front, especially by the government. It's only been a few weeks since Public Safety Minister Gary Nathalie was caught on leaked audio overtly stating that their gun control agenda is politically motivated and doesn't really make any practical sense.
Don't ask me to explain the logic to you on this, okay? And this is something that very much a big deal for many of the Quebec electorate.
Despite that, they have shown absolutely no indication of any intent to back down from their unjustifiable criminalization of honest and otherwise law-abiding citizens. And as bad as that is, it's sort of expected behavior from the government. Divide and conquer is the oldest trick in the political playbook, and the Liberals have made it a foundational cornerstone of their party. But there is another kind of person in Canada who is all in on the gun control ideology. And this kind of person is not just necessarily ignorant or misled from the truth, but instead is the type who simply wouldn't accept the truth even when it is staring them straight in the face. There are many different reasons and explanations behind this kind of behavior, but a fundamental and unshakable denial of reality is the clinical basis for a delusional disorder. And a prime example of this archetype is none other than the spokesperson of Police Souvient turned politician, Nathalie Provost. So to start here, I want you to know where I'm coming from. Because there's been no shortage of evidence over the years of Police Souvient spreading lies and promoting hatred towards us gun owners, and we'll be sure to touch on some of that in this video. But the catalyst which really drove me to make this video was Provost's behavior during the confiscation pilot program press conference just a few weeks ago. Now initially, I had made jokes about Provost's demeanor at the press conference, like she started off the day rather chill, but the more our public safety minister spoke, the increasingly irritated she became. And to be fair, I can hardly blame her. Because Gary has proven himself lately to be a bit of a tool in every sense of the word. Yet at the same time, whenever she was given a chance to speak, she had a look of absolute glee and elation about her. Like she was as giddy as could be as she promoted the persecution and criminalization of hundreds of thousands of innocent Canadians. And that was the more curious bit that really stuck with me. Because I couldn't exactly figure out what was going on there. But after having a few weeks to think about it and really letting that thought ruminate, I think I finally figured out why that stood out to me so much. I don't think the emotion we're seeing is happiness exactly. I think it's catharsis. What we're seeing out of Provost is an overwhelming sense of relief and then the joy which is associated with that. Now, when people hear of catharsis, they generally think of someone having a particularly rough day, at work or whatever, and then coming home and having a good cry which alleviates the stress of that day. But that's not all that catharsis is, especially not within the realm of psychology. According to the Palo Alto University, emotional catharsis is the release of negative emotions such as anger, fear, or unresolved trauma, which, given Provost's tragic origin story, is undoubtedly the appropriate angle for us to be investigating today. Now, unlike the occasional cathartic response that a normal, well-adjusted individual might feel after a stressful day, modern psychology appears to have largely dismissed catharsis as a valid therapeutic exercise. And its limited usefulness must be approached with caution, because catharsis can apparently result in reinforcing negative behaviors, particularly for those with mental health issues rooted in abuse or trauma, which is what I think we're seeing play out in real time here with Nathalie Provost. And all of this may sound unfair or like I'm trauma blaming her for this or something, but hear me out. When she gets up on stage behind her podium for her gun control announcements, we never really hear anything reasonable about why lawful firearm owners cannot be trusted with their freedom. And we also never hear any credible statistic or evidence which demonstrates that our community is somehow disproportionately prone to violence or that we're untrustworthy in some fashion. Because those claims are just simply untrue, and they're so far from the truth, even she knows she couldn't get away with dishing out such lies. So instead, she gets up and says that we need to protect women and children or other vulnerable people from gun violence. And she knows that we must do this because she knows what it's like to be a victim of gun violence. So she's not an expert on firearms or on public policy or anything. She's an expert in being a victim. And she put this on full display less than a year ago when she and other women's groups held a press conference less than 2 weeks before the second ban list came out. So this isn't ancient history or anything. And in it, she said many damning things regarding her motivations for gun control.
Mr. Poilievre never speaks about domestic violence. he thinks we are speaking about gun because we are against gun owner. We are not. We are for Canadian, for women, for children's safety. That's what our fight is about. And we need that Mr. Poilievre understand that we love our mothers, wives, companions, sisters, and daughters. And if we like them, we will consider that that the issue with gun is not with criminal guns. It's with legal gun owners that have issues, and we must protect our families. I am a victim of a femicide. I was shot by a legal gun owner. And I think we have to listen to those women, to those men who believe that we have to do something.
She blatantly says that the issue here is not unlawfully acquired firearms that are used by gangs and criminals who are terrorizing our communities, but merely the existence of law-abiding gun owners. Now, she tries to specify that it's only the gun owners with issues that she has a problem with, but the measures she proposes and supports indicate that she's after all gun owners. Because in her mind, any person who has a firearm, particularly one of these so-called assault-style firearms, is intrinsically a person of issue. That anyone with a firearm automatically poses a risk to women and children. The implication here is that if you are someone who doesn't believe in gun control at any cost, then you simply don't care about the people who may become victims. And this is also another topic which is understood in the field of therapy. It's called trauma-informed advocacy, and it's something that the Liberal government of Canada has embraced on all levels. This page is an article from Public Health Canada, and it focuses on how organizations and service providers should respond to and manage traumatized individuals. Now, this article is way too long to dive into, and I'm probably not the guy to do it anyway, but one of the biggest takeaways here is that the purpose of trauma-informed advocacy is to minimize harm, not to treat trauma. Now, at the level of the individual, I could even appreciate this approach, especially in the earlier stages of treatment. However, at some point, this approach needs to change or it can lead to some pretty disastrous results, as we're seeing play out here with Nathalie Provost. Like, I can see the wisdom in not being dismissive of victims, but we should also not be putting them on a pedestal. And we should definitely not let trauma become the basis for public policy or criminal law. Like, we've all heard the aphorism that, might makes right, but when did we decide that plight makes right? According to Public Health Canada, trauma is a kind of mental illness which refers to a person's experience during an event that is so distressing that it overwhelms them emotionally, which is precisely the problem here. Nathalie Provost is incapable of being rational or objective because of how emotionally connected she is to her event. And that is simply the nature of what trauma does and is. Like, we don't let victims serve on juries, and for the same reason, we shouldn't let someone like Nathalie Provost decide gun control policy. Not that we should be dismissive of her suffering, but at the same time, we need to recognize that the way to resolve her anguish is not more gun control, it's more therapy. Because at the end of the day, she's sick and she needs help. Like, were it not for her newly found political status, I would even be advocating for people to be gentle with her. It's sort of like how some people can commit a horrible violent crime, but end up being found not criminally responsible for their actions. Now, while her delusions don't go quite as far as all that, Provost is also not in a right state of mind either because of the unresolved trauma of her past. And unlike other gun control types, her trauma makes her incapable of being objective. Like when Trudeau or Mendocino would get up on TV for their press conferences, all I ever felt towards them was disgust, because they knew they were lying, and we knew that they were lying. Worse still, they knew that we knew that they were lying. Like, they were absolutely vile and repugnant individuals displaying truly psychopathic behavior. However, it is a curious thing. Despite the fact that Provost tells no less pointed lies, and in fact, often the very same lies, I've never felt any disdain or animosity towards her for telling them, and it's taken me a long time to figure out why. And I think it's because she's not evil or malicious, she is simply unwell. Like, when she sees someone with a firearm, she does not see a hunter or a sport shooter or a collector or just some guy with a hobby. She sees her assailant. She feels all the terror and despair of that dark day, and it's the likes of which that we can't fathom. But her trauma makes her incapable of seeing one simple and indisputable truth.
I am not those men.
So, Nathalie Provost's fear and hate are understandable, but not acceptable. and it certainly should be no basis for public policy, nor is it sufficient justification to call for the mass imprisonment of the group that you hate. Yet at the same time, much like Frodo failing to destroy the One Ring in the fires of Mount Doom, hers is not exactly a moral failing. Like, it's completely understandable and even expected for her to behave as she does after suffering as she has. So I think, like, for a lot of us, if we're being honest with ourselves, we would also become similarly traumatized after such a horrible event. But even so, that does not extend any legitimacy to the false idol that is gun control. But even outside of the one example of a single individual, there are a large number of people out there who also support gun control, up to and including the entire prohibition of all civilian firearm ownership. Yet most of those people would promote such ideas even without the traumatized past to support it. So what about those people? Are they similarly mentally ill? Well, that answer is a bit easier to explain, but they do fall for a very similar pitfall which could point us in the direction of that conclusion. Well, first off, if you find yourself in a position repeating the same nonsense that the mentally ill are repeating, odds are you're on the wrong side of it. But more than that, this behavior is also very similar to a kind of delusion called a persecutory delusion. A persecutory delusion is a type of delusional condition in which the affected person believes that harm is going to occur to oneself by a persecutor despite a clear lack of evidence. The person may believe that they are going to be targeted by an individual or by a group of people. Persecutory delusions can range from the possible, although improbable, to the completely bizarre. Does that sound familiar? I think it would actually be pretty hard to find a more appropriate description of the core foundational flaw for those in favor of gun control. However, to be fair to them, I don't know if this necessarily rises to the level of a disorder exactly, because this belief is mostly the result of brainwashing, yet it does play out like that in every practical manner. Many of them have been conditioned to believe that lawful gun ownership poses some kind of legitimate risk to society at scale. Like, some of the people who promote gun control surely have malicious motivations, whereas others merely may have irrational phobias of firearms themselves, but I think that most of the regular everyday Canadians who believe in this, quite frankly, they're simply ignorant. Ignorant not only of the statistical reality of the relationship between lawful firearm ownership and public safety, but also ignorant of the hypocrisies that they are supporting. To be clear, it's not like we should completely discount the fact that people have been hurt by firearms in the past, and in some instances, those individuals do have lawfully owned firearms. It's quite rare, but it does happen. If we want to use these outliers as a starting point for some kind of basic rules to help reduce future events, that would be one thing. And that's even the basic idea behind the licensing scheme that we have here in Canada. But that's a far cry from what Nathalie, Provost, and the other gun control types are currently encouraging. They want to use the possibility of harm as a justification to promote the imprisonment of somewhere in the area of 500,000 Canadians who have never done anything wrong and never are going to do anything wrong. Like, there is a big difference between that kind of gun control and some kind of basic or reasonable firearm regulation. Like, we are well beyond the realm of reasonable or even common sense at this point. Because the delusion here is not a debate about whether or not guns can or cannot hurt people. The delusion is that it's somehow okay to use these hyper-rare examples originating from singular individuals to strip the freedom from millions of Canadians who have never done anything wrong and never will. Like our side always says, if we applied this reasoning to literally any other topic, people would look at you like there was something wrong with you. And rightly so. And that's because Canada doesn't have a gun problem. Gun owners have a Canada problem. All that being said, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Yet at the same time, much like Frodo failing to destroy the One Ring in the fires of Mount Doom, hers is not exactly a moral failing. It's completely understandable and even expected for her to behave as she does after suffering as she has. And I think that a lot of us, if we're being honest with ourselves, would become similarly traumatized after such a horrible event. And even so, that does not extend any legitimacy to the false idol that is gun control.